ancient biblical prophets wrote about the future. Today, theologians are poring over those scriptures with a firm belief that their prophecies are coming to pass. Journey now into the world of eschatology on Prophecy in the News with author and lecturer J.R. Church.
Who were the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6? Those sons of God who saw the daughters of men in the days of Noah. Were they the offspring of Seth, as some modern theologians say? Or were they fallen angels from among Lucifer's minions? Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the ghastly truth of the days of Noah.
And J.R., the ghastly truth about the days of Noah is simply this, that mankind, God's special creation, was corrupted genetically. And the race of people spoken of, referred to as giants in Genesis 6:4, there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. J.R., there were giants in the earth before the flood. The flood destroyed the giants because they were a corrupted race, but also there were giants after the flood.
Okay, now, if we're talking about sons of God being extraterrestrials,
yes,
or what today is called aliens, or angels and demons from the pages of the Bible, we've got to figure out how they got here and where they live today,
yes,
and who they are exactly, and what their purpose for what they were doing in the days of Noah was.
Well, J.R., I think there's a problem in the thinking of 20th century man. We've become supremely rational, scientific. We come out of a scientific age, and it's not fashionable, quote unquote, to believe in things that lie just beyond the pale. In other words, those principalities and powers and rulers of darkness that Paul talks about, I think are not perceived as being real. They're thought of as being far, far away.
Now let's face it, Christians today really have trouble with believing in the casting out of the demons by Jesus.
That's right.
And as during his ministry here on the earth, we don't connect to that. We don't quite understand. We can't comprehend it, and I guess it's perhaps because we don't have any direct connection with them.
Exactly, and yet maybe we do in ways that are just now becoming clear. You know, Jesus would walk up to a man whom we would call epileptic or mentally ill, lunatic, to use the King James language, and he would not say, be healed, but rather he would say, I cast you out. Leave this man. He would command the demon to leave this man. And I actually believe that there was a demon there causing that illness, meaning that the demon touched the human being, causing a problem. Today we don't believe that, or do we?
Okay, now let's look at this. We cannot give a blanket opinion of all who have mental or emotional problems today.
Yes.
We're not saying that every epileptic is demon-possessed.
No.
There can be chemical problems with the brain. There can be
sure.
Physical problems with the brain. But what we are saying is that demons influence people, period.
Demons influence people. In our roundabout way, this is what we're trying to say. And there is a situation that we're going to be talking about in this program and the next one that is a huge 20th century phenomenon that, J.R., that I believe involves demons touching people in a very real way.
And you're talking about the UFO phenomena and UFO abductions.
UFO abductions. And we're going to be talking about spiritual combat that is an absolute living, breathing reality. J.R., I've got, and I don't usually have a stack of books, but I have 6 books here out of many, many other books. I've just picked 6 hardbound books, one published in 1965. Now, we're not offering these books, called The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller, about a UFO abduction, Barney and Betty Hill, made into a full-length picture in the 60s, a television, made-for-TV movie, and a New York Times best-selling book, The Interrupted Journey. chronicling 2 lost hours, quote unquote, aboard a flying saucer, in which a married couple were abducted. And when they came back, they didn't even remember they'd been abducted. And all they knew was that they'd missed 2 hours of time.
And now these books are written by people with credentials.
Absolutely. For example, one of these books is written, the title is simply Abduction. It's written by Dr. John E. Mack, MD, PhD, psychiatrist, tenured professor at Harvard University. This man has credentials. I have a couple of books here by Dr. David Jacobs, PhD. He is a tenured professor of history at Temple University. He's documented over 600 cases of UFO abductions, and I consider this an important enough phenomenon, and it's, by the way, important to the understanding of biblical prophecy, that it's worth a little discussion, and we're going to have that today and in the next program.
Now, one of those books is concerns a symposium at Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
That's right. I didn't even mention that. Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, Alien Abduction, UFOs, and the Conference at MIT. 1992, a conference was held at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, our most prestigious technical university.
So this is not just the stuff of science fiction.
That's right.
This is the type of study that's going on in some of the highest levels of universities and government today.
And government, and as we shall see later in this study, I believe that our government and the governments of other countries are involved, deeply, deeply involved in this phenomenon.
Okay, let's talk about the classic case of missing time, Barney and Betty Hill.
And that would be the interrupted journey, 2 lost hours aboard a flying saucer. In 1961, Barney and Betty Hill, married couple, had been taking a vacation in Canada. They were driving back to their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, driving along late at night, and they encountered what looked at first like a star, a bright star, which became erratic in its movements. It began to move down closer to them. They thought maybe it was a satellite. It got even closer. They were out on a lonely stretch of road, and finally this thing came right down, and it presented itself as a saucer-like vehicle, lit up with big windows, and people looking out the windows. And they said it was as big as an airliner. And that's all they remembered. From that moment until they got back to their home, they remembered nothing else. They remembered vaguely having seen something like a light, and then the next thing they knew, they were home.
So the story came out that when they went to a psychiatrist.
That's right. Dr. Benjamin Simon, the psychiatrist, after this strange thing happened to them, they were having nightmares, they could not sleep, couldn't eat. Literally for months, they were struggling with shall we say, post-abduction syndrome, which is what it's come to be called now, but at that time it was a brand new thing. And they finally went to a psychiatrist, and Dr. Benjamin Simon, and he helped them to remember what had happened to them. He helped them to resolve all the conflicts, because what they discovered was that they had literally been picked up, taken aboard this flying saucer, and examined medically before being released. And they became the archetypal case of UFO abduction. Again, this happened in '61. The book called The Interrupted Journey was published in 1965. The movie, I think, came out in 1966. And J.R., this was the 60s. This is the time when we were having space consciousness. That is, sending...
NASA was preparing to go to the moon.
Yeah, NASA preparing to go to the moon. We had also Star Trek, for just to name one example. The television program Star Trek came out at this time. There was a consciousness in people's minds being developed about outer space, and the Hills were presented as a couple who had been abducted by aliens from outer space.
Now, we'll talk about the medical examinations in a few minutes, but first let's talk about what they were told by these aliens.
Well, they were told by the aliens that they were being treated specially, picked up. The aliens actually let it slip, quote unquote, hinted that they were from a star called Alpha Pegasi in the constellation Pegasus. and that they were regular travelers to our part of the galaxy, and that they were here to examine human beings because that this was their way. They were on a kind of a, shall we say, an exploratory trip, and they just wanted to pick up a couple of local specimens and examine them.
Now, from all of the abduction cases that are in those books and myriads of others, what's the real secret? Where are they from?
JR, I believe they're from right here on good old planet Earth, and they've been here for 5,000 years. Ever since Genesis 6, they are nothing more or less than the fallen angels, the demons that corrupted the first creation.
What are they doing with these people now?
Actually, I think their job is to continue that corruption. We've got a break, and we'll be right back to talk about that in just a moment.
Gary, you said the aliens or the demons had planned to corrupt the human race. Could you explain?
Well, JR, they corrupted it the first time in Genesis 6. They corrupted it genetically, maybe as a slight side effect of what they were really after. I think that the fallen angels deeply desire to incarnate into this dimension, to have bodies, to replicate themselves, to enjoy physical pleasures on this plane. They are lascivious. I think that's a good part of what they do, but in the process, they corrupt the human genome. JR, they did it before the flood. Genesis 6:4 says also they did it after that. And Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man, meaning that they are going to do it again in the latter days. They're trying to incarnate themselves, and in the process, they are corrupting our genetics.
Now, these creatures, these demons or fallen angels, are immortal beings.
Yes.
My question is, why would they want to inhabit a temporal body that's going to die? And you know, I was thinking before the flood, men lived hundreds and hundreds of years. Adam lived 930 years, Methuselah 969. So these were pretty good bodies for them to use at the time.
Yeah.
Is it possible that that is the reason why the Lord shortened our lifespan, so that we would not be quite so attractive to them?
That's an interesting thought, and yet the Lord says that they still desire human habitation. The Lord himself described demons as creatures wandering in dry places in search of a refuge. And he said that they will find a mind that is ready to receive them, and they will incarnate themselves in a human. And of course, the Lord should know how demons operate. Now, JR, one more thing. In our day, I believe there is such thing as demonic possession. But this is different. This is abduction for the specific purpose of forming a breeding operation to create a hybrid species that is suitable for them to incarnate in.
Now, we're all familiar with Ken Arnold's his flying saucers back in 1947, and then there was this crash near Roswell.
That's right. Really, the whole thing starts in 1947. It does go back to 1897, but we'll talk about that a little more later. Everybody remembers the year 1947. Kenneth Arnold saw and described flying saucers for the first time. And then there is Roswell in early July 1947 on a ranch out in New Mexico. Supposedly a vehicle crashed, and supposedly our government scooped up the wreckage and some little people and hid them away, and it's all been hush-hush and top secret. Well, JR, people are beginning to talk. And the word is beginning to come out that our government really was involved in this.
In fact, our government, made a deal with these people?
It seems that our government may have done that because in that year, an operation called Majestic 12 was prepared under the Truman administration. And a report called Magic was written. On July the 7th, 1947, a secret operation was begun to, and I'm reading here, assure recovery of the wreckage of this object, that is the object that crashed in New Mexico, for scientific study. During the course of this operation, aerial reconnaissance discovered that 4 small human-like beings had apparently ejected from the craft at some point before it exploded. Now, These words come from a document published by our government called the MJ-12 or Majestic 12 document. Some people have said this is a phony document, but JR, it's passed a lot of crucial tests for authenticity. It contains a letter dated September 24th, 1947 from Harry S. Truman to the Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, and it authorizes him to proceed, quote, with all due speed and caution to look into this matter of the crashed
Read that
UFOs.
letter, would you, as we have it in our upcoming November edition of our magazine.
Yeah, we do have this, the whole letter. Dear Secretary Forrestal, as per our recent conversation on this matter, you're hereby authorized to proceed with all due speed and caution upon your undertaking. Hereafter, this matter shall be referred to only as Operation Majestic 12. It continues to be my feeling that any future considerations relative to the ultimate disposition of this matter should rest solely with the Office of the President, following appropriate discussions with yourself, Dr. Bush, and the Director of Central Intelligence. It was signed Harry S. Truman. Now, JR, this means that from the Truman administration forward, quote-unquote, little green man and crashed flying saucers became part of our government policy, and we have to ask the question, who were the little men?
Wasn't it Dwight Eisenhower, the very next president, who once made a speech saying that somewhere in the future war is going to be with extraterrestrials?
He alluded to that. We also had a couple of generals who alluded to it in the Army. General MacArthur alluded to our next war being against aliens. Ronald Reagan, in his presidency, made a speech saying that perhaps one of our next wars could be against aliens from outer space. The four small human-like beings, the way the government described them in this context, apparently really did exist and do exist to this very day. They're apparently being, preserved.
So they are a subject of a cover-up.
They're a subject of a cover-up. We have to ask ourselves, were these beings from outer space, or were they some sort of beings masquerading as space travelers, in reality associated with the legions of Satan? And I believe the latter to be true.
Now, we've seen all kinds of reports about UFO sightings.
Yes.
These UFOs that are being sighted, are they just flitting around up there having fun or tweaking our interest, or are they on a mission?
They're on a mission, JR. I think they have been from 1947 to the present.
What is that mission?
That mission is a breeding program. As strange as it sounds, the same program they had before the flood. It is a breeding program. We've all heard Dr. Hynek's Close Encounters of the First Kind, Close Encounters of the Second Kind, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in which people see flitting lights, daylight discs, they see UFOs land, but then there's the Close Encounter of the Fourth Kind, and that's what's documented in all these books that I have here. Close Encounter of the Fourth Kind is where there is involuntary physical contact with these alien beings that involves kidnapping.
Well, Gary, this has been going on for 50 years now.
Yes, it has.
So how many people have they been able to breed, and how old is the oldest one?
And I would hesitate to mention this had it not been documented by, again, people in very high scientific circles, MIT. Over 1 million people in the United States alone at a minimum, according to a statistical analysis of the facts we now have in hand.
Have been abducted and breeded from this?
And bred. A typical abduction involves a celestial kidnapping, shall we say. People are paralyzed, they're laid out on tables, they're told that they're being medically examined, but in fact, what's happening is that reproductive samples are taken, women are often artificially fertilized, they find themselves impregnated, and then perhaps weeks or months later, the embryos that they carry are removed mysteriously. And this, by the way, has been documented by medical doctors, by ultrasonic sonograms. There are dozens, hundreds of cases of missing fetuses.
Well, I've got to ask you, Gary, these men with credentials who've written
Yes.
about this, what is their fear of the future? What is the ultimate outreach that they fear?
Well, the bottom line, JR, is that they fear that through a very surreptitious means, a force which they think is from outer space, because these are not believers we're talking about here. These are secular thinkers. They believe the force is from outer space, that it is here to quietly create a hybridization program which will allow it then to take root here and to supplant our existing society.
Supplant our existing society?
Yes.
In other words, make extra intelligent beings
Right.
that will, set up political positions
Sure.
in high places and take over the planet politically and establish a one-world government, make slaves out of humans?
Those are the very words that the abductors have mentioned to their abductees. On occasion, the abductees have been told, after a while, in a very short while, your governments will no longer be necessary, because when we take over in what they call, quote unquote, the change, which they say is very, very near, after that there will be simply one government, centrally controlled, that controls the whole planet, and they will be in charge of it. This is what they themselves have told their abductees.
They're going to turn us human beings into cattle.
In a way, yeah,
Basically.
you might say that, yeah.
Slaves.
And JR, I find myself balking at even talking about all this. It's so strange, and yet it is.
Sounds apocalyptic.
It sounds apocalyptic.
Jesus said there would come a day when there would be a world government and an antichrist. Well, may not be long. We'll be back in just a moment.